Hey fam, what's up? I want to continue a little bit of this kind of like educational type of content that I've been making recently. And this is, I'm no constitutional, scholar or anything like that. But I am just trying to get us to kind of wrap our arms around what the Constitution actually says about a few things, okay? So here's the deal about the Constitution. In the first three articles of the Constitution, there is a separation of powers that is laid out. And you've heard me talk about this, and if not, then go back to older videos. Executive branch, right, which includes the office of the president. The legislative branch, which is Congress, right? They make and pass laws. And then the judicial branch, the Supreme Court, federal judges throughout the country, etc. So judicial, legislative, executive, those are the three branches of our government. Ultimately, the authority of the government rests in the people. We, the people. As it says in our founding document. The sovereignty, the authority of the people is enshrined in the Constitution. So if we're looking for what is the source of authority and power, the Constitution is the source of authority for our government. So the president doesn't have authority just because someone's called the president. The presidential authority, the authority of the executive branch, is conferred onto the president by the Constitution. So the Constitution is what gives the power to government, because the way that the Constitution is written outlines certain rights and responsibilities for government. Does this make sense? I'm trying to kind of go slow here, but I want us to sort of all have a sense of what we're talking about here. So we, the people, are in charge. We are a democratic republic. We vote because we have the power, but we're not a direct democracy. A direct democracy means that the people vote on all matters of Congress. So in a direct democracy, any decision that would be made would ultimately be the decision that we would all vote on together. When you have a country like America that has a large geographical land mass and has 330 million people, it would be a logistical nightmare to try to sustain a direct democracy where every single working of government went on a ballot to the people, because Congress makes a lot of decisions. And we're not just talking about, an annual budget or something like this, or a continuing resolution or an omnibus bill. We're talking about lots of pieces of legislation. We're talking about lots of so many different laws, etc. So there's a lot that gets voted on, right? So we're a representative democracy. We vote on the people who we think will best represent our interests in Congress, in DC. We vote for people who we think will represent our interests. That's the idea behind a representative democracy. Ultimately, the power of government, the power of America rests in the people. We, the people. Because we are a democracy, because we are a democratic republic, all authority rests with the people. And our authority together, what you could call our sovereignty, Jamel Bowie has been really good on this. So if you're watching this on the Clock app and on Insta, Jamel Bowie's been really, really good on this. And he actually he's got some credentials in constitutional law. So he's a good dude to look to. I'm just your lay person's, I'm like the the accessible version or something like that. So the people's authority is enshrined in the Constitution. So the Constitution is a document of our authority as the people. We, the people, ... Okay, that's the Constitution. So the Constitution decides how government operates. And in the first three articles of the Constitution, there is a separation of powers, executive, legislative, judicial branches of government, okay? Now, when we look at the executive branch, when we look at the power of the president, now the president, of course, has a lot of power. It's the highest office, right? He's the highest, he currently, but they are the highest office holder in America. They have a whole lot of power. And they can take a lot of unilateral authority through things like executive orders. And all presidents have exercised their right to executive orders. Now, we could have a more, nuanced conversation about the number of times that different presidents have enacted different executive orders. And I'm not interested in that right now, because I'm not interested in individual people. I'm interested in, let's all understand how government is supposed to work by the Constitution, okay? So the president has a lot of authority, but not unlimited authority. You have to understand, America was founded for a whole lot of reasons, but a chief reason is that we did not want to be under a monarchy. We didn't want a king. The innovation, 70 years ago, we were a new nation. I mean, that old Gettysburg Address that maybe you had to memorize in middle school or something. Our innovation, our novelty, right? And we're not alone. We're not unique in the world for this. There are other democracies, obviously so, right? And really, we're inspired by the French Revolution, and the French Revolution also inspired the Haitian Revolution, etc. There's a lot of history here. We're not the only democracy in the world, but one of the innovative facets of American history is that we rejected the idea of a monarch. That we said the power will reside in the people and we will elect our representatives to govern on our behalf. But ultimately, power rests within the people. Okay? I wanted to make that clear that the Constitution, in effect, is the codification, is the enshrinement, is the document that holds the power of the people. Okay? And it is the Constitution that confers authority onto our leaders, right? The president, if there were no constitution, there would be no presidency, there would be no authority, right? The president exists as an office and has authority by dint of the Constitution. Does that make sense? So the president is ultimately accountable to the Constitution. That is our chief primary governing document that codifies the authority of all of us, okay? Power to the people, and our power is enshrined in the Constitution, and the Constitution then confers authority to our leaders in order to govern on our behalf, but their governance is restricted or restrained by the Constitution itself. Because remember, America is about not having a monarch, not having a king. We do not want a sole decision maker who has no checks or balances, who can just unilaterally govern our entire country. America was founded in part on the rejection of that idea. Okay, we do not want one single decision maker to rule over all of us. All right, that's important. We should know that about our country. We should know that about our founding. Now, you can look at like Tad Sturmer and a bunch of these public historians who did terrific work on the patriot myth. So I'm glossing over a ton of stuff here, but I'm trying to get us onto the idea that power rests in the people, and the people's codification of that power is the Constitution, and the Constitution then confers authority onto our leaders. And we were founded on the idea that we are not a monarchy. We don't have one single leader that acts unilaterally. We have power in the people, okay? Now, when we look at the power of the presidency, the president has a lot of authority, but not absolute authority. So, for example, the legislature, the legislative branch, Congress, possesses the authority for budgeting and appropriations. So funding, money, who gets paid and how much do they get paid, that sort of thing. That's Congress's authority. They control, you've heard this, the power of the purse, right? Congress decides how American taxpayer dollars are spent. They hold the budget. And once you budget, then you have to appropriate. So like budget and appropriations. I might ask Whitney if I can buy a new hat. And Whitney may say, yeah, we can budget for you to get a new hat, but you can't get that for 3 more weeks after we pay off this other thing or something like that. So the budgeting is the initial conversation. Whitney, may I please get a new hat? And she says, yes, we'll budget for that. But then when it comes time to actually complete the transaction to purchase my hat, then that money is appropriated, right? Then she says, yes, here is the money. Whitney is the budgeter in the house, the chief financial officer of the home, as I call her. So budgeting is like, yeah, we're going to do this thing. Appropriations or appropriating the funds is actually like signing the check. Here it is. Okay. Budgeting and appropriations. By the Constitution, that authority rests with the legislative branch. Okay. So the president cannot unilaterally make funding decisions on behalf of all of us. Funding has to go through Congress. Now, a president is welcome to work with Congress on budgeting and appropriations. And all presidents do that and all Congresses do that. That's sort of how we get on with our business. But the president must work through Congress to accomplish that. Agencies cannot be created without Congress. Agencies cannot be destroyed without Congress. Funding cannot be frozen without Congress, and funding may not be enacted without Congress. Congress, by the Constitution, which is the authority of the people codified, the Constitution confers the authority to Congress for budgeting. So if you are a president or a vice president and you unilaterally, by executive order, freeze federal funding, then you are in violation of the Constitution. Not by an opinion, not by somebody's idea, not by vibes, but because the way the Constitution itself is authored, the president simply lacks the unilateral authority to make budgeting and funding decisions without Congress. Period. Full stop. So that's not to say that, that a government could never freeze federal funds. Of course, a government could freeze federal funds. A president would just have to work with Congress in order to make that legal, in order to make that above board. The president cannot amend the Constitution unilaterally. A president is not allowed to sign an executive order that changes the Constitution. Now, why? Because power is in the people, and our power is codified in the Constitution, and the Constitution confers the authority onto the president. The president is responsible, is accountable to the Constitution. The president isn't up here above the Constitution. The president is below the Constitution. It is the Constitution that gives authority to the president. So the president doesn't make funding decisions on their own. The president is not allowed to make constitutional amendments on their own. A president could make a case for a constitutional amendment and could work with Congress in the direction of a constitutional amendment. In fact, our Constitution has been amended a lot, right? So it is a proven method for amending the Constitution. And the president is welcome to be involved in that process, but the president cannot do that unilaterally. So when we complain about dissolving the separation of powers by consolidation of all power in the executive branch, that's not people having the opinion that the president is bad or wrong. It's not an opinion. It is a fact that when the president violates the Constitution, when they work outside of the bounds of the Constitution, it is illegal. More than that, is illegitimate. Because the president is not above the Constitution. The Constitution is above the president. It is the Constitution that confers authority upon the president. Does this make sense? So recently, I've been making a lot of videos raising alarms about unilateral funding decisions, raising alarms about an executive branch that would choose to disregard judicial branch orders. That's not because I'm a woke lib. It's because I understand how the Constitution operates, right? And I only understand it at a middle school or high school level. I've never been to law school. I'm not a constitutional scholar. It's not my area of expertise. My area of expertise is philosophy. So tune in for that next. Not really. It'll just put you all to sleep if this hasn't. What I want everyone to sort of wrap their arms around here is that what we're observing now is what people are calling a constitutional crisis. Now that sounds like an esoteric, heady word. It just means that what we are observing is that currently the executive branch is not adhering to the restrictions of their power as laid out in the Constitution. As soon as a president decides to make unilateral funding decisions, as soon as a president decides to attempt to amend the Constitution, when a president unilaterally decides to shut down a whole agency, that is not like a bad idea because it is my opinion. That is working outside of the bounds of the legitimate authority that is conferred onto the executive branch by the Constitution.